going to start off looking at analytical thinking. And this would, in a sense, this would be stepping you through the process by which you would start to think about what is the larger institutional learning goals and how do your course-specific goals align with them. Using the language from the Fink model yesterday, this is in a sense a part of that, the bottom part of his scale underneath the triangle, right? The context, the larger context. There may be institutional learning goals. There may also, in your programs, be specific programmatic learning goals. And I'll show you an example of that from IH. And I think Jeff and Julie will also be mentioning that. So under analytical, we have these 4 different dimensions, which is what runs down the side, obviously. And we're just going to start, I'm going to show you an example of one. Acquires, analyzes, and evaluates information from multiple sources, which is the first one listed here, right? So you notice that there's a scale, right? A level of performance, increasing performance. And this is vastly condensed, right? From emerging to developing to proficient to exemplary. And what you would then want to think about is within those characterizations of different levels of performance for that dimension of that institutional learning goal, where do you see your students in your course achieving? At what level are you of student performance would you reasonably expect your students, most of them, to achieve by the end of your course? So let's say that we're going to pick proficient is the level that we want the students to achieve. So this is an example of an IH course, IH 231A. It's a second level IH course taught by a professor in religious studies, Professor Gretel Van Weeren, on human culture, ethics, and nature. She has a course goal, an overriding course goal of what her expectations are for the class in its entirety for the 15 weeks of the semester. She has specific learning outcomes that the students, by the end of successful completion of the course, students will learn to 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And I'm not going to read them out. They're in the handouts that you have. So then, this, you probably can't read some of the finer print, but especially in the versions that you got. But if we're working with the analytical thinking goal, and we're focusing on primarily the first dimension here of acquires, analyzes, et cetera, what we did, working with a small group of IH faculty in collaboration with Nancy DeJoy, is that we operationalized the institutional goals and dimensions in terms of a core of IH courses that we're thinking about developing that we're calling for now global IH courses that have a global theme. So we have some programmatic goals. These don't really have official standing at this point. These are something that we worked on over the last semester. Professor Van Weeren then developed specific course-based learning outcomes for her students that based upon the institutional and programmatic goals, students who've taken my course will fill in the blank after taking my course. And you notice that she's got a bit of a developmental sequence going on here. Analyze, then interpret, then evaluate, then compare and synthesize. Again, we could talk about this in terms of Bloom's taxonomy. We could talk about it in terms of Fink's taxonomy. But that it's all somewhat correlated. Again, you can see how they sequence, if you could actually read it in your handout, the programmatic goals with the dimensions, with the institutional goals. So we start off with a goal, and then we identified a level of performance that we are expecting our students to achieve as a result of the participating in our course related to that specific goal dimension. We have a programmatic goal, an IH goal, compare and synthesize diverse viewpoints on the context of concrete global environmental problems. So we have a programmatic expectation that this is aligned with. And then she has a set of assessments, and what she's going to be doing is having, throughout the 15 weeks of the semester, 10 1- to 2-page reflective essays based on the course readings and class discussions that are sequenced in such a way that they teach students how to analyze, interpret, evaluate, compare, synthesize, etc. Right? So these are formative assessments that are done throughout the semesters that are not only designed to measure student performance, but also to teach students how to analyze, interpret, evaluate, etc. Right? So, and at the end of the semester, she has a summative assessment in terms of, if I remember right, a final exam.